This is a door we cannot afford to leave closed. You do not want to be the HR leader who doesn't know what generative AI is and doesn't have a position on responsible use in your workplace.
This is L&D Unlocked, a series for L&D and HR professionals looking to unlock the future of learning and development. Presented by BizLibrary, L&D Unlocked is an ongoing series where we speak to industry experts and thought leaders about the future of work, workplace trends, and how your organization can prepare today for the challenges of tomorrow. Learn more at bizlibrary.com.
Welcome back to another episode of L&D Unlocked. I'll be your host, Chris Elliott, Chief Revenue Officer at BizLibrary. We have got a great episode today. Francesca Molinari is going to be joining us today to discuss something I know is on a lot of your minds. Gartner has just released their annual top priorities for HR leaders for 2024. I think a lot of you asked the question, which is very legitimate. How much is hype and how much do I really need to be worried about? You know, that for those of you that aren't in the Fortune 100, you may not have an infinite amount of resources and you're trying to drive change and the right type of change at your organizations. You're going to get to hear from a seasoned practitioner. Francesca's been with organizations like Adobe, like eBay, like GE, as well as more recently in the startup technology space. So brings a wealth of knowledge. Welcome to the show. You want to do a quick introduction?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Chris. Hi, everyone. So great to be here with you today. I'm Francesca Molinari. I'm a 5-time Chief People Officer. And Chris said I've worked for large companies, mid-sized companies, and I'm now very squarely in the startup world. So great to be here today. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you so much for joining. So for the audience, if you want to play along, we're going to walk through the report together. It's just going to be a conversation between the two of us that I think you'll enjoy. We're going to kick it off on what Gartner says is driving the priorities. So before we get to the priorities themselves, and we're just going to tackle these, I think if you're good with it, let's tackle them as a group. They list 4. Okay. Unsettled employee-employer relationship, persistent skills shortage, rising impact of AI, and finally pressure for operational efficiency. That's what they're calling is kind of the contributing factors. How does that land with you? You know, are you experiencing those personally within your peer network? What do you see as the key pressure points driving HR behavior next year?
Yeah, I think it's really important to acknowledge, Chris, that everyone listening to this call may be in a very different personal circumstance based on where their company is. Some of us are in growth companies. Some are in companies that are going through a down cycle. Some may be leading the charge on an acquisition, a huge integration and acquisition. Some may be on the receiving end of a huge acquisition and integration. So, I think it's important to remember when we look at reports like these, which are helpful and important, but to remember that the degree to which they may or may not apply to what you will be personally leading this year along with your team, can vary greatly. So I'd say, it's important, it's relevant, it's great to know what's on the top of mind for these global HR leaders and to kind of fact check against what's going on, in our business. Gartner, I think, did a really good job. I'm just looking down at the report, out of the chute with some of these statistics. I really believe when you want to create change, it helps to kind of think about, do you have a burning platform? And clearly we do. So according to Gartner, only 50% of employees trust their organization. Stop there. 50%, I'll read that again. 50% of employees trust their organization. So the obvious thing is, so 50% don't. So what are we going to do about that? And are we really getting the best of an employee's performance and discretionary effort and commitment if half of our employee base doesn't trust our organization? Mm-hmm. And that's one statistic of, here's another one. Nearly 50% of employees view their current performance as unsustainable. Now, Gartner's called that productivity anxiety. I don't know if that's, why is that? That just makes me want to, dig in. 50% of employees believe their current performance is unsustainable. Is that because we're asking too much? Is that because there's other factors going on in their lives? If we reduce the size in some companies of, there's been a lot of layoffs in 2023. Have we reduced teams to the point where others have taken on more? And then this one, another burning platform. Only 26% of organizations report that their employees fully comply with on-site attendance requirements. Now, if you read that fast or listen fast, you go, yeah, okay, whatever. But just reverse those numbers. That means 74% of organizations, and this was a big survey, a big global survey. So listen to that again. 74% of organizations say their employees are not complying with requirements. So we collectively, everyone who's listening in and beyond, I feel is really compelled to dig into that. And if you're in the 25% or 26%, you're fine. But the other 74% really needs to pay attention to that. Either we need to relook at those and re-examine those requirements, or we have to decide, do we really mean something about compliance and requirements, and what are we going to do about that? I definitely have a strong opinion.
This is why we brought you to this show, because there's Francesca's going to tell it like it is. And I think you're absolutely right in not getting caught up in, we'll get to Gen AI in a minute, but maybe not getting caught up quite so much in the zeitgeist of Gen AI when something like 3/4 of your people aren't compliant with the fundamentals of where and when will we work policies. That's probably the more pressing issue right now.
Totally. And let's take that one step further, Chris. If I feel comfortable or not complying with a requirement, what other requirements am I not comfortable complying with? So you can take that further to say, if you have a requirement and then allow 75% of the companies, according, this report, not mine, are saying 75% are saying our own employees aren't complying with something we require, then what other requirements might they not be complying to? And we can tie that to Gen AI in a minute, but certainly there could be other things as well, right? Have you created a culture by which you might have a set of rules and regulations or expectations, but they're empty because we're not looking for accountability?
Yeah. And I think that also speaks to, their first kind of what's driving is this unsettled employee-employer relationship, and, not creating policies that you can't actually enforce in practice. Because it doesn't matter how great the policy is, if you're not prepared to enforce it's worse than probably not having it at all, because now you created this precedent that it's okay to not follow the policies that we publish.
1,000%. You're a parent, Chris, if I recall correctly. So.
I've got 5 of them. So.
A couple times over. I thought it was 5. Right. Yeah, so right? If you have expectations in your home, it's really important you follow through, and that whatever your expectation is, you make it clear, you communicate. Maybe you give, parents have a varying degree of warning systems, right? Some are the no warning kind of parents. Some are going to count to 3. Some are going to give you 3 chances and what I call super secret squirrel warnings. But whatever your style as a parent, ultimately we know that we do our children a service when we teach them accountability. And when we say something is a requirement or an expectation, that we hold them accountable to that and call them out when they're not meeting those expectations. Yeah. If we kind of turn a blind eye to those expectations, I think it has creep into our business.
Yep. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're gravitating out of these 4 to the unsettled employee-employer relationship as the standout from their list. Is that right?
Yeah, probably that one, and also number 4, again, which is the operational efficiency. I think that's an important one too. The health of our business, the key results of our business, the financial outcomes of our business. The rest hardly matters if we don't get that right. And so, reading from the Gartner survey, the most prevalent efficiency-related keywords from S&P earnings calls this quarter. So last quarter, Q3, productivity, efficiency, reduction. Now, here's the trick, right? On one hand, I'm holding flexibility, controversy, performance anxiety, and mutual mistrust. In the other hand, our leaders on earnings calls are talking about productivity, efficiency, and reductions. You know where I'm going with this, right? Yes. As we dial up here for productivity, efficiency, reductions, you're actually dialing higher, not lower, or could be if poorly implemented on things like performance and feeling like I can't keep up this level of performance, of mistrust of leadership, and on my desire to comply with requirements such as, on-site requirements. So if we're not careful with how we implement solutions that are going to turn the needle on our business, we could actually see that unsettled employee-employer relationship go in reverse rather than ahead in 2024.
Yeah.
These two things can't be detangled. One is absolutely going to have an impact on the other if not done well.
Yeah, and I think that is a major shift, particularly in the industry. But both of us have kind of grown up in the tech space, but it's not unique to tech. This golden age we had, the 2000s to present, of cheap capital, growth at all costs, no matter what the unit economics are. Profitability is second to growth rate. The market has spoken. That is not where we are right now. It's about actually creating profit for shareholders through those growth efforts, and that's put, I think, a different lens on a lot of individuals in the organization that haven't always been so mindful. And that's felt, I think, all the way down to your point. As the pressure's coming on one side of the equation, what does that do at the individual employee experience, and how does their relationship with the business change as we start to emphasize things like the efficiency metrics over just growth rates?
Yeah. And here's a bit of good news. I'm sure we're going to talk a lot more about that, but here's a bit of good news for everyone participating in this call, which is, if you've spent the majority of your career or your leadership, years of your career in a growth cycle and economy and, kind of the golden bubble you were just describing, you're going to be a lopsided leader. And so I guess the good news is this is a good opportunity to get balanced. A true executive, a true leader, in my opinion, needs the salt and peppering of life, of business cycles, right? Up cycles and down cycles, how to be a growth leader, as well as how to do things well, like productivity, efficiency, and reductions. And so the good news is, a positive outcome of more difficult times is, number one, they help us focus in on what's really important and help us learn to be more efficient and effective with shareholder capital, which should be important in every business cycle. Even in the golden days, we should always be good stewards of our capital, whatever the sources may be, depending on the kind of company we're in. But this is a great, if we were to look at it clinically, which is hard to do because these things, productivity, efficiency reductions, are hard things. So I don't mean to sanitize it, but there is the benefit of, for the human resources leaders on this call, these are necessary skills, and there's no better place to learn them than on the job.
Yep. All right. Hey, let's. You want to get into the top five? Can we get your take on number one out of the gate? Is leader and manager development number one priority per Gartner for 2024? What say you?
Yeah. Gosh. So here it is, page 5. Managers are cracking, and more training won't help, which, a big fulsome agreement, there. Yes. And yes, I think we're so quick to say the answer is a book, despite yours, a podcast, which has enormous value. A classroom or virtual classroom learning. I mean, we're so quick to kind of throw, respectfully, Harvard Managed Mentor on it, or a Skillsoft or LinkedIn Learning, you name it, right? And I happen to fully agree with Gartner of managers are cracking, adding, training requirements, which in many, many cases often don't really help with real lasting change. And skills development is not going to be all that helpful. And so they've got a couple of key quotes here. The average manager has 51% more responsibilities than they can effectively manage. That's a place to start. right? Before we look at what else can we add, what else can we do to train them to deal with what they're dealing with? Let's just look at that. Let's accept for the moment that's true. Let's accept for the moment that you accept that for your organization, or test it, which I would encourage you to do. Find your number and see if it's a problem for your organization. That's really one way to help with this issue of managers are cracking. If that resonates with you on this call, and if you think perhaps your leaders might have 51% more responsibility, I'd encourage people to test that, to find the data that's true for your organization. You could even be higher. Or if you're lower, then, great. Maybe that's not something you need to work on. Maybe your managers are in terrific balance, and that's great. But maybe something else. Maybe they're really junior and need some more help. So it's finding out what's true. If this is really meant to be a 2024 priority, then I'd encourage everyone with us today to think about what's going to move the needle in your organization or in the unit of a business that you're focused on.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'm going to ask maybe a dangerous question. We L&D Unlocked, we go live, so we don't pre-script these. All right, I agree, and I'm the guy who, among other things, is selling training, right? And the headline here is managers are cracking and more training won't help. I would agree with that as written, but here would be my big caveat. I love your take on this. I'm going to assume that the context for that statement is when I think of the company that views training as an event, that, we just promoted them. Let's put them through a 3-week course, whatever it is, 16-week course. And that's it. Then they're a phenomenal manager, right? And when I look at some of their recommendations, one of them is rebuild your manager pipeline. I think one of the ways I would interpret that is about truly creating cultures of continuous learning, where it's not training, it's part of a much broader curriculum and approach to both talent retention, talent engagement, promotability, effectiveness in role. And those aren't trainings. There may be a training, but it's part of a much more thoughtful approach. And in that sort of context, I think training can be highly effective. Where I think it's woefully ineffective is when we just, to your point, we throw them an HBR article, or we do a one-off, and in no way does that really prepare them. But do you think that's a fair assessment as it relates to kind of curriculum and ongoing development?
I couldn't agree more. I'm really a believer and a practitioner in holistic human capital practices, which is another way of saying what I think you're describing here, right? You promote a new manager, a new leader. Gosh, the last thing you want to do is, and they're already feeling like they have 51% more than they can handle. So we're going to take them out of the job for 3 weeks. How are they going to feel before they go and when they come back? And is any of the goodness that they might get out of that environment really going to stick? We tend to punish the good, right? We take our best and we'd like to think that we're enriching them. But sometimes, in enriching, when this removal from your job and this immersion and some experience can actually, just add more to the plate, often. And if done in isolation, I'm not sure it creates real and lasting change. I think what you're saying, Chris, which, is something I would absolutely agree with. When you look at learning versus training, or learning of which training is a part, then I think we can create real and enduring change, right? Looking at the role, looking at the person, looking at the pipeline for the role, looking at compensation, looking at responsibilities, looking at systems of reward, looking at how we select people who are going into managerial jobs. The entire human capital flow of activities really has to work together, and training, I think, informal and formal, should very much be a part of our commitment to learning. I'm much more about learning than training. Training, to your point, you said it really well, is often just an event. And events like birthday parties kind of come and go. You go, oh, that was nice. And but learning should be continual, should be enduring, should be something that is cumulative, builds upon itself.
Yep. That's a good segue. So when we talk about things that are more systemic, the second piece of their top priorities, number 2, was organizational culture.
Yeah.
which I think that's going to be more pervasive and omnipresent than a one-off training. So maybe we're going in a better direction here with the organizational culture being a priority. What was your take on this one?
Yeah. I mean, what's the famous quote, right? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Like, yes. And, respectfully, Gartner, I don't think this is new, or
Yeah.
necessarily to me, there should be kind of evergreen priorities. And I can't imagine a year in which this isn't ever amongst them. Like, please tell me
Yeah.
what year culture doesn't matter to your organization.
Right.
It's kind of the lifeblood of how so many things will go, including but not limited to your business results. So I nominate organizational culture for the perpetual, top placement award. I think it's absolutely critical. But again, some really startling statistics here. 41% of HR leaders say employees' connection to culture is compromised by hybrid work. Well, we need to look at that then. Now my company today is fully remote. We have unbelievably high ratings on Glassdoor and comparably an incredibly engaged culture, and we do it in a completely virtual environment. It can be done. Period. Period. The end. And in my company and lots of others, I really believe culture can be built in a fully remote or hybrid environment. I've been in some, maybe you have too, fully in office cultures where, being in office and having great culture do not go hand in hand. Being in office and having nice snacks do not create great culture. But the other statistic, Chris, that I took my breath away, 47% of HR leaders don't know how to drive change to achieve the desired culture. So said differently, 50% of HR leaders, most of these were CHROs, don't know how to change culture. That's like bread and butter of the job. So Houston, we've got a problem. If 50% of the people in a CHRO or some type of chief people leader role don't know how to change culture, and we know culture is going to be so intrinsic to the success of your business, so that would really be something for us as a community to focus on. Then maybe we need to do a better job of helping one another, or maybe we need some training around that.
Oh yeah.
That is you can't do it alone. So my thought on culture is it is incumbent upon the chief people officer to be a culture carrier and to really help drive the culture. And you can't do it alone, right? I do it in partnership with my CEO and the leadership team and people leaders and the HR team, of course. But if you're in an HR leader of a business unit or of a business, and you don't know how to change culture, then for sure your culture won't change and won't thrive. It is up to us in that job to understand how to create positive organizational culture.
I agree with everything from that segment. Hey, a couple I would love to unpack with you. I agree. Let's go back to the beginning, at least for the foreseeable future. I can't imagine a time that this is not true, but it won't say forever, that organizational culture should make the top 5 list. That should be a default placeholder. One thing I do think has happened though is employee expectations of culture, I think, have risen dramatically over the past 10 to 15 years, and particularly post COVID, where the whole world went remote. And now for the potentially for so many people, for the first time, my employment opportunities are not limited to the radius in which I'm willing to drive, and I think that was a major game changer for exposure to how different it could be and opportunities that could be afforded. But what do you say? I mean, in terms of employee expectations, do you think there's been a material change over, both post-COVID and, call it past 10, 15 years?
Yeah. And going further back, which I can, even more. I was, saying to someone the other day around the area of, we haven't even touched this one yet, but, wellness and well-being and bringing your whole self to work, right? When I started in my career, bring your whole self to work, the standard expression was check it at the door. We don't want your whole self.
Yeah.
We would like your work self and your work self only. And whatever is there was such a clear dividing line between what was professional and what was personal. And literally anyone who would show up with any monicum of an issue was they literally told, often written in performance appraisals, check it at the door. It was, you did not bring your whole self to work. And that's just in my career. If we were to go another generation back, probably even more so. So I think in relatively short order, we've turned that on its head, and employees very much now not only bring the entirety of themselves to work, they have increasingly high burdens of demand on what an organization can and should be doing with all the stuff that's now brought into work. And we can have, a fun or intellectual debate all day, whether that's good or bad. I'm just going to kind of judge it neutrally and saying, regardless of what you think of it, I couldn't agree more that the expectation has changed. You might think that's good. You might think it's terrible. You might think there's pros and cons, but I think anyone would be hard pressed to say expectations haven't changed and people are bringing much more to work. And by the way, Chris, how is there then not a correlation between what we talked about at the beginning of this around managers cracking? Managers are dealing with a whole subset of issues that just weren't part of being a manager.
Oh, for sure. That's exactly where I was thinking. It was back to the leaders. Yeah, I remember getting explicit, overt training on effectively how to conform to your manager's managerial style. And again, reserving judgment on right or wrong, or where should the pendulum be. Where the pendulum is right now very much is managers, the burden is on you to conform to the preferences of your team to get the best work from them. And that's a burden on even a seasoned manager, let alone a first-time manager who's just trying to figure out the basics of the role. And now they have to do it in a way that's optimized for every individual performer. That's a big task.
Yeah. Yeah. And then layer in, I couldn't agree more. And I'll lump on top of that, the culture in which we live and how much of your personal, what we used to call your personal life, I think it still is, but, is still brought into the workplace, and managers being unequipped, unaware, maybe even at odds with some of the things that their employees are struggling with. And, I'll pick a, relatively simple one. There was a time and place where you didn't talk about your political views in the workplace. It wasn't done. And maybe you agreed, or maybe you didn't disagreed with your manager, but who knew? That wasn't really part of what you would talk about. Now people are demanding of not even their manager, but that their organization have stated political opinions and go out there publicly and make certain stated political opinions. And it's no wonder managers feel like they're cracking. The royal we have not equipped managers to deal with the whole host of issues and challenges that they're dealing with, on top of also managing the work.
Yep. I think that's another great example of, to your point, the corporate stances on what could generally, rightfully so, be labeled as political issues is a relatively new trend. It's become pretty mainstream. It's pretty common to have C-suite kind of voice on the topics at hand. All right, I'm going to keep us going. We're going to take just a short break, not long at all, to hear from the sponsor of today's episode, BizLibrary. So we'll hear from them. We'll pick it up right back with number 3.
At BizLibrary, we know that employee development and retention have never been more critical to your business. We help you build learning programs that create safe and inclusive work environments, elevate employee skills, and develop leaders who drive results. So now, you can take award-winning BizLibrary content and put it to work to help overcome your biggest challenges. BizLibrary, where learning happens.
All right, and we're back. Thanks so much for taking a quick listen to a short plug from Biz. Let's pick it right back up. Number 3 is HR technology. So extremely curious to hear from you on this one. What do you see as projects, either again within your organization or your peers that you're talking with? What are they trying to take on? And of course, the but we haven't talked about it that much yet. But the off in the corner is Gen AI, and where does that fit into HR technology for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's number one on my personal list. So I'm going to start on slide or page 3 of the Gartner report, because I think this is the most compelling statistic here. 68% of executives agree the benefits of AI outweigh the risks. So I like to round up. So almost 70% of executives believe the benefits outweigh the risks. Awesome. But only 22% of HR leaders are highly engaged in enterprise-wide discussions on Gen AI. So 70% of leaders believe it's important, believe the benefits will outweigh the risks, and less than a quarter of us are engaged in discussions in our company about generative AI. So the royal we, the collective we, really have work to do, if we haven't yet, in opening the box of Gen AI. And look, we're not here to be engineers. We don't need to know how to program it. But I think any of us who aren't keeping abreast and being reasonably facile in the terminology, in understanding what it is and isn't, in knowing how to be a good consumer, of knowing how to encourage and lead your company, if no one else is, on their position on use of generative AI in the workplace and responsible use of generative AI in the workplace. This is a door we cannot afford to leave closed. You do not want to be the HR leader who doesn't know what generative AI is and doesn't have a position on responsible use in your workplace.
Yeah. Here would be my take on it. With my career being in the as a technologist in primarily talent technology, this is where this one in particular, I think there's a little more hype as it relates to technology for HR right now. I think if you're an HR leader listening to this podcast, heed Francesca's call. Educate yourself, educate your people, how to use it responsibly. And I think a lot of what you can do to further the organization is the skills that are going to be required to effectively leverage it. But the part to me that I think is a little bit in the bubble of kind of blue chip, Fortune 100, Fortune, Global 2000 is like, should we build or buy? And I would implore you, if you're listening to this, don't embark on the bridge to build. I would leave that largely to the tool builders out there that will bring something to market for you, and likely not next year, if we're being honest. HR tech is not going to be the first to really meaningfully sink their teeth into this, but I do think HR plays a major role today, like right now. And it's on responsible use and equipping more of the skills to take advantage of the technology, which I think will hit your other departments first. They will get the HR tech, but HR tech is probably not first up, is my take on this. But what's your read?
Yeah, I'd say, order of magnitude, I'm going to go one step behind you before, going into your step and then maybe ahead. But what is in front of us, and in fact, if you haven't addressed it, you're already behind, is employee utilization of generative AI technologies today. If you don't have a company policy and approach and procedure, you can assume your company confidential information has now been put into an open source tool that we know has shared data that the very creators are saying is not something you should assume is impenetrable and safe, and is meant to kind of make a community stronger. Now, look, all that said, I am one of the most forward-leading Gen AI HR leaders you will find out there. We've had our policy in place for months. As best I know, we were one of the first companies to create a responsible use policy, and we've open sourced it, and it's available to anyone to use as a jumping off point for your own company's policy. So I say this with the greatest love and respect for the potential of Gen AI, but what we don't want to happen, or what we didn't want to happen in our company, is for employees to kind of say, gee, I could really use help in putting together, a PowerPoint presentation on our competitive positioning versus our competitors. Let me copy all this data into ChatGPT or Bard, And you have got to assume that these sources are, it'd be like standing in the middle of an airport on your mobile and sharing your company's competitive information. It isn't different. And so we very forward leaning as a company. We encourage employees to use tools. We really do believe it's a fantastic suite of tools to use to be more efficient, more effective, even in their early development stages today. I personally use ChatGPT and Bard and consider I've got an extra half a head on my team for the capacity that it gives to us. But we need to do that within a framework of responsible use to make sure our company confidential information remains confidential.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think this piece of the show, I know why a lot of people are listening to this episode. If I was going to stack rank it, kind of your priority order, number one, exactly as Francesca outlined, governance around use. That would be step one if you're in a people leader role right now, and likely you're going to want to partner with your CTO, your CEO, your entire kind of exec team to make sure you get that right. But that would be called order one. I think secondarily, before you jump into trying to deploy it within HR, I'd look more broadly at the organization to ask, how can we prepare our workforce for AI at large? And I think opportunistically, of course, nobody's more excited about AI for HR tech than I am, but that's not what I'd run to first in 2024. And I think that may have been the little, I wouldn't call it misleading, but I think that's the shiny piece of this. I think there's some prerequisite work that's foundational before you go all in on Gen AI for HR tech right now.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, unless you are in a business whose business is HR technology, then by all means, please focus on this fast and furiously, because that is your business.
That's right.
If you're not in a business whose business is creating HR technology, then having great HR technology is not going to differentiate your business or impact your key business results. And my personal belief on HR leadership is I'm here first and foremost to drive the business.
Yep.
How I get that, and HR, many other things also need to be done. But, having the newest cool tool on some internal thing that's for HR use only, unless it has some massive cost savings. So if I ran a super mega enterprise and it was costing us millions and millions of dollars to staff an HR call center, for example, to answer basic employee questions, and I could make a business case that said, for an investment of this, I can reduce these costs because I'm going to eliminate or redeploy these roles, right? Then you've made a business case for the use of it that can save your company money or can redeploy resources into better and higher use. But, for me, I've never wanted to be the HR leader who had great HR for the sake of great HR. I want great HR for the sake of a great business.
Yes.
And so I would not encourage anyone, unless your business is making HR technology, to focus in 2024. There will also there's a lot of test and learn. There's a lot of mistakes out there. There's a lot of things that are being called generative AI that in no way, shape, or form are. And I think there's a lot of, case law yet to come, particularly around hiring practices.
Yeah.
So I would use extreme caution. But here's a simple one that I've been doing for months, in our team. Use ChatGPT or Bard to develop a job description. You can do that today, literally. Please, if you haven't already, just go use the free version. Just try it. Don't be afraid. Open the box. Take your job description, put it in ChatGPT and say, make this better. And just see what it comes up with. Or put in a job description that you think is great and ask it to come up with interview questions. Start to use and practice these tools with non-confidential data, not to do your job or the job of your team, but to assist you, to give you new ideas. I mean, often when I write an email or an employee communication, I put it in ChatGPT, again, no confidential information, and I just say, make this better. Now, I don't take what it says verbatim usually, because it tends to be a little superfluous and makes me sound like I'm able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. It sometimes needs to be dialed down in tone, but with no technology skills, I have been able to train my ChatGPT on the voice of my company, on my personal voice, and it knows what our values are. It knows what work culture we look for. It is actually trained. Super easy to do, by the way. And so when I give it a task of writing something, I'm getting so close to the pin each time in a zero cost. I use the free version. And so start to just experiment with it. But to your point, I would not make an investment in new shiny HR generative AI technology a 2024 priority. Think about what your business needs to focus on. To your point, what skills not all of your employees, some of your employees may need to have in this space, right? If you're at a big enterprise company, not everyone is going to need these tools. Are going to become baked into everything we do. Not everyone will need to understand exactly how they work. They are already being put into things like Microsoft Office products, etc. Where I would focus would be, is your product and engineering team getting the support and learning and exposure? Because there you really want your employees to be differentiated in this space.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. That's absolutely where you have the highest impact. And to your point, it's not the same across the entire employee population. There's going to be pockets where kind of the reward for that investment will be significantly greater than others. All right, let's do lightning round on the last two, because I want to leave the final words for you on what you think may be missing. So lightning round on Gartner's last two. Number 4 was change management. What was your take on this one?
Yeah, evergreen. I mean, when are we not going to have change, and when do we not need to know how to deal and lead through change well? So that goes in my Gartner make it evergreen bucket.
Yep. My lightning round take on this one would be not the same for everybody. Everybody's at a different point listening to this show, but there's 3 macro pieces right now that are putting pressure on every business. The market pressure to perform, I'd say customer expectations, generally speaking, and where we started, the employee-employer relationship is not in a great spot. I'd say I'd make 24 about managing through that. I wouldn't be injecting change right now. Like I try to get through what is already an inordinate amount of external pressures that I think are causing stressors on the business. I always like to use a line from our CEOs. I look for evolutionary, not revolutionary changes next year, because I think there's already a lot going on, and I wouldn't try to approach getting through change management with bringing about a lot more revolutionary changes. There's so much right now putting pressure on boards that I think navigating those waters is to me the call to action next year. Last one, career management and internal mobility, which I also think is related to employee-employer. What do you think here?
Again, when is that not going to be? I've been doing this a long time, right? When is someone hoping or aspiring to take on, if they so want, more responsibility and envisioning a career that gets deeper and contributes more? When has that not been part of our mandate and priority? I do agree with Gartner in that I think the old formal, hard-coded ladders are bygone, and good riddance to them. I've actually never been a fan. So Gartner caught up with me eventually. I really believe in more of a career compass where you're looking to be directionally correct, but enriching people and helping them build a career, build out their skills, their capabilities, help to make new, deeper, better contributions year over year, I think is another, it's an evergreen importance for what we do. May it always be at the top of our priority list, but we have to get more modern in how we think about it. Also, employees are staying with companies for a shorter amount of time than, probably ever before. And so, as we think about people, there's a lot of movement around, gig work and task work and interim work and project-based work. And so, I do think this star may begin to dim over time, perhaps in some kinds of companies where we may see more and more pieces of work being done in a more transactional kind of way, as opposed to I'm an employee of this company and I expect to progress up the ladder, over time. I think employee expectations have really changed in that regard.
Yeah, agree wholeheartedly. And you touched on something that was really well said. A compass, career compass, not a career ladder. And Gartner actually touches on that a little bit in their report. They refer to don't design career paths, right? It's really about creating growth opportunities. And Francesca, I think you nailed it on. Employees' vision isn't always linear, and for that matter, it may go left then right and then back to center. And if you want to retain your people, having that agility to show them progression in multiple ways is what will keep them at your org and not going external. I think we've got to adapt.
Yeah. And I'll add to that, going back to the first one we were talking about, people are cracking and bringing your whole self to work. What's true for you next year may not be true the year following, right? If your family has just welcomed a new baby, or you're in an elder care situation, or a personal or spousal or partner illness, may not be the year you're thinking about, gee, what do I need to do to get ahead, right? Someone once drew for me, one of my managers drew for me a career map. And she's like, some years you go like this, and some years you go like this, and some years for personal reasons, you may need to go like this. And that is truly, I think, the arc of careers. And we would do well to acknowledge that there's times in our life where, I love business results that go up and to the right, but I don't think we as people always go up and to the right. And there are realities about our lives and seasons of our lives that are to be acknowledged. And, maybe there's a point in our life where we don't always want career progression. We want to be career fulfilled. Or there may be a period where we have to take a step back before we go forward again. And I think more mature companies who really want to engage and retain employees won't always leave all their good rewards just for those who are always going. Not everyone can get ahead. And if you're focusing all of your goodies just on those who are highly promotable, you're excluding a huge portion of your, people in pillar roles where you need stability.
Yep. So great point. All right. Final word, as you think about those who are listening to the show, they're working on their strategic plans for next year. Where do we want to invest our time? For you, what's something that you would really advise that maybe wasn't captured in this report that you'd encourage them to all think about as they're working on their plans and resource allocation for next year?
Yeah. Focus on I think I've said it, but I can't not end cap with it. Like, if there are great insights from you, from these and other sources on what priorities for HR should be, and they align really well to where your business is and what it needs but the number one thing I would do in creating my HR or departmental HR strategic plan for 2024 is start with your business plan and map your time, effort, energy to your business results. Everything you do, other than things that might be legally required or things that get, thrown on the plate, but you should be able to map every single one of your big discretionary projects and initiatives to your business initiatives, not something someone else says important in HR land. Focus on your business.
Yes. The source document, as great as it is, because we can talk about it, pick it apart on a podcast like this, but the source document should be your company's business plan, not,
1,000%.
All right, we'll cut it there. Thank you so much for joining us on another episode of L&D Unlocked. Be sure to check out the whole series. We publish them weekly. Francesca, thank you so much for joining us today. We absolutely want to have you back.
I would love it. Thanks so much, Chris. Take good care. Bye.
This episode has been brought to you by BizLibrary. Head to bizlibrary.com for more information.